Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, my brother. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing well by God's grace. Yourself?
Doing okay. Doing okay. I should say good evening to you. It's it's past afternoon at your time.
Yes,
Did you have a good weekend?
yes.
I'm glad. I did too. Everything seemed to go real well.
Yeah.
We have uh, we have one of our members that is going to start classes coming in September. He's going to start the school. Yeah, he's a teacher there in the area, and he went to Tanzania here a couple of years ago. Him and his wife and their two boys, and came back and went back to teaching. But he wants to try to preach, and so he's going to educate himself to preach. He does a
That's
good
great.
job. He does. He fills in for me from time to time. So I'm he's looking forward to it, and it'll be good. He's good.
Sure, sure,
He's a good
sure,
brother.
sure.
Here comes Jeremiah.
Hey Jane, I'm sorry. I
Good morning.
I
Hey,
got sidetracked.
not a problem. We were just discussing one of our members uh, is going to be starting the school come this coming September. He's been a teacher since he got out of college, uh, and he's decided he wants to preach. He fills in for me and things like that. Was in Tanzania for a little over a year. He and his wife, and because of government or whatever, they had to leave. Uh, and so he came back and went back to teaching, and he just decided first part of this year he wants to start school, so he's going to start in September full time.
That's awesome. Well, what how old is he?
He's 30 something.
Okay.
I guess he's got well, yeah, maybe a little older than that. He's got a 14-year-old boy, and I think the other one is like 10. Uh,
Okay.
so they're good folks. I've known his in-laws and his wife forever. When we had night classes here, when we first started the school years ago, she came. Her mother was she taught them at home teaching, and
Mm.
their Bible class they brought them over here. So I taught his wife years ago. They're very uh, astute in the Bible. They know the book. So he's got a good start. We've been trying to tell him it's not going to be like a Sunday morning Bible class. It's, but he knows that. She knows that because she took my classes here. Uh,
Okay.
how did your Sunday go? Good.
Good. Good, really good. We actually had I think we had two or three new families that came in that
Well,
day.
wow, that's good.
Yeah. And so yeah, it was really nice. And then we there's a young girl, her name's is Corona, and she I guess went to go be with her mom just a little bit in Tennessee.
Yeah.
She was baptized so just a couple of weeks ago, but her dad lives over here in the Chesapeake, Virginia Beach area, and so she's been bringing her dad Sunday morning for a couple Sundays now. So we're trying to build a relationship with this guy, and
That's that's great.
mhm.
We had a young lady. She's been ever since I've been there, and I've been over there since 2013. So a long time, 12 years, or almost 13 years. But off and on, she'd come. and then she'd disappear for months, and then she'd come back, and then she'd disappear for months. Well, she came back. She brought her husband and her little boy.
Nice.
Both last Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and he's coming with her. So that I think he's a good prospect.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah, she's a good prospect too because she hadn't been faithful. But
I'll pray for them. What's their name or last
Hannah,
name?
Hannah Nut.
Nut. Okay.
Yeah, they're nuts. we tease her there, but we have two nut families in our congregation. They're not related, but they're both with the last name of Nut, N-U-T-T. So
Oh, really?
yeah.
Oh,
So but he seemed to kind of like it. He just kind of was talking to people and everything. So I'm looking forward to working with him. I think they'll be an asset. So,
yes, sir.
but and we'll have a prayer. I don't know. I'm not sure. I've got to find out about Nathan. He was considering dropping the class, so I don't know whether he did or whether he didn't. And Gracie, I'm not sure about her. Sometimes she's a little late coming on, but Manuel, if you'll lead us in a prayer, my brother, we'll get started in class.
Sure. Let's pray. We are gracious unto you, most glorious and everlasting Father. As we are about to study your word, Father, we thank you for the gift of life and the strength that you have given to us, most especially Brother Jane. Father, we are grateful unto you. As we are about to study your word, we pray for understanding. Give us everything. We also pray for our brethren who are on their way to join the meeting, also unto your care. Whatever that prevents them or hinders them from not joining the class, Father, it is your will that you grant them successful so that the next day we all with one accord we joined and learned your word and also spread it to the world so that at the end your glorification will be unto your name. We thank you for listening to our prayer through our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, my brother. We are in, let me see. I can't remember what chapter we were in, but we're talking about usury. These are just some laws that he's going to talk about. These people that are going into the promised land, chapter 23. They're not as familiar. Well, they're not familiar at all with what's expected of them when they get into the land. And a lot of these things were not talked about in the wilderness because there was really not any way to do some of them. It wouldn't have made any difference anyway. There's not going to be a whole lot of borrowing and lending in the wilderness. And he talked about that on loans there in verses 19 and 20 that he called it stealing. Now, you not steal from an Israelite through unfair interest. Okay. So that's, in other words, he's talking about things that would have been, and I think when the borrower, gets, all right, he's going to get something. Well, really, God understands that the lender should get something. But in talking about unfair interest, he's talking about the concept of loaning money for necessities. When you think about food, maybe shelter, clothing, things like that. And that's what he's talking about, something that goes beyond normal, I'll give you this if you give me that. But it's kind of any type of a loan is kind of like a covenant with God. God says, we'll make an agreement here. I'll give you this, you give me that. I promise this, you promise that, and that's the way it was here. The interest rate in the ancient Near East was out of sight. we complain about our interest rate, but it could sometimes, when you were talking about Syria, especially during the 15th century BC, that interest rate could be 50%. That's a lot of money. I borrow 100 and I pay 150 back, so I'm not going to borrow a whole lot of money. But that, now that was to an Israelite. A foreigner, you could charge whatever you wanted to that person, because usually that was for business interests. Not that God wasn't interested in their business interests, but he said you can charge a foreigner. Again, I don't think he expected his people to be unfair in any dealings with fellow man, or whether it was an Israelite or whether it was a foreigner. But he said you could charge more to a foreigner than you could charge to an Israelite. Now, also there, if you look at verse 23, it talks about the concept of stealing from the Lord. Right? You couldn't steal from a fellow Israelite, but what about you wouldn't, I don't know of anybody who would want to think about stealing from the Lord if they had any dealings with the Lord at all. But he put this in here. It was about failing to pay a vow. Now, a vow before God, it's not a little thing. It's not a small thing. God wants us, and actually, if you think about it, he commanded that Israel be very careful to keep what they promised and fulfill every vow that they made. We have a tendency as human beings to throw language around, and I think we have to be careful with that. Of course, we have to be careful with our language. I've heard people in the last, I've said this in my lifetime, and probably all of us have, I will do it, so help me. Well, I may not say, so help me anything, but I'm saying, I will do it, so help me. Well, that's a vow. That's a promise to somebody that I'm going to do something. Now, if I promise God something, and really, I think it would include here, if I promised anybody anything, I'm really violating what I promised God, because I promised God that I would keep my vows. So, God's going to, especially if I tell God that I'm going to do something, I have to make sure I'm going to keep it. Breaking of an oath, you think about. I was talking years ago, I was talking to a fellow about one of my members, who's a really nice guy. I mean, really, and he was faithful. I mean, he would do whatever you asked him to do. He was there all the time, and he and his family. And I made mention of, I said, do you know, they both worked the same type of job, occupation. And I said, do you know so-and-so? He said, yeah. And I said, he's a pretty nice guy. He said, he is absolutely a nice guy, but don't ever do business with him. I said, well, that's not good to find that out. So in business standards today, it's kind of a standard practice to, well, we're going to promise this, but you got to know up front they're not going to do it anyway. But to God, that's a sin. Payment of vows. Well, it's mentioned a lot in the Psalms, especially like Psalm 22. It says, I will pay my vows before you. That wasn't what that's not what that one says. I will pay my vows before those who fear him. Well, what about those who don't? If I promise a non-Christian, I promise somebody who has nothing to do with religion in any way, shape, or form, I still have that obligation. And I think this is what he's talking about. Over in Psalm 50, it says, pay your vows to the Most High. Well, I understand that too. Here's Israel at Mount Sinai, and of course all the fear that went on there. You just tell us what you want us to do. You tell Moses, and Moses will tell us whatever you want us to do. We will do it. Well, that was a contract that they made, and so God's kind of reminding them. And if you look at, I think it's in Malachi. Malachi said, "Cursed if you make a vow and don't keep it." So we have to, if I don't make a vow, I won't have to worry about that. But we're going to do that. We're going to make promises. Somebody asked me one time if vows or oaths are permitted for us to make today. Are Christians? Well, based on what Jesus said over in Matthew 5, if you look there, beginning in verse 34, it says, "But I say unto you," now I think we're getting the wrong slant on what he's saying here. He says, "But I say to you, do not swear at all by heaven, it's God's throne, by the earth, it's God's footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great King, nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, for whatever is more than these is from the evil one." Well, James kind of said the same thing, but Jesus is not forbidding oaths. Rather, he's telling people that the integrity of your word should not make should make an oath unnecessary. But if you make an oath, you need to make sure you keep it. You shouldn't have to. If people know you, I grew up in an age and in an area where there were very few contracts between, like my grandfather being a farmer, there were very few contracts between him and the other farmers. The contract simply was a handshake. That was it. Because they knew that if my granddad shook their hand and said he was going to do something, it was going to be done. And he felt that about the others. And so I think this is what he's talking about here. Jesus in a court was asked a question: "Are you the Son of God?" He said, "Yes." He and they didn't believe him. They crucified him because of that. But you think about that. God basically in his contract with us is swearing oaths. If you, I guess, if you abstain from vowing, God never requires vows, but it's if we make one, I think all he's trying to do there is say, when you make a vow, especially to God, but if you make a vow to God, you have to pay it. Of course you pay it, or you're going to pay for it. I'm trying to think. I think it's in the book of Ecclesiastes. Probably is, because it sounds like something Solomon would write. I think he said, when you make a vow to God, I'm not going to probably get this exactly right. Do not be late in paying it. Excuse me. For he takes no delight in fools. I think that's the term that he used. So pay what you owe. So, and I think this is what he's talking about there. The performance of vows, we are bound to, we are required, we are bound to make those vows good. But I think it's gotten to be so frivolous that mankind just promises anything, and they know when they promise it, it's not going to happen. But they still make it. We make I think we make this foolish vow way too many times. You ever heard anybody say, "I'll never do that again"? Well, of course you won't till the next time. And so we make so many foolish things. It, you know, and I think this is kind of what he's talking about there. Be careful what you're vowing, because a lot of them are just foolish. There is a vow that we as Christians need to make, and that's a vow to be obedient to God. We don't have to swear to anything to do that. We kind of did that when we went through the obedience to the gospel process, and I think this is what he's talking about. So don't be careful about vows. Are they wrong? Am I sinning if I make a vow? That's not what Jesus is saying. He's just saying you as a person, your integrity should be that you don't even have to ever make a vow. You just say yes or no, and the integrity will speak for itself. Stealing, verse 24, stealing from a traveler.
Hello. Please, I have a question.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I think last Sunday I had opportunity to talk to some people in our church, and after the sermon, they asked me that why is that God does not make the laws that He set for us very easy for us to follow, so that we will not go astray. Like He should reduce the form of like laws that He set for us, knowing our capabilities and strengths. Why does He not make the laws easy for us so that it will not be like we are disobedient? Or why is it that He does not let loose of the things that He says, but wants us to abide in all of those laws that He has set for us?
Why didn't he just make it easy for us?
Yes, please.
Well, if he made it easy, we probably would just be nothing more than a robot. See, God could make it very easy, but then how would he know if he made everything easy? How would he know that we really cared? And I think, this is sometimes, well, why is it so hard? Well, it's not hard. Being a Christian is not hard. God, and don't misunderstand me, it's difficult, but it's not hard, because God, every time He says, do this, He says, here's the way you can do it. So I think that when you think about obedience to God, it's not hard to have faith. It's difficult, but it's not hard. It's not hard to confess. Difficult. See, so everything that we do, if God made it easy, everybody'd do it. And God doesn't this is hard to say. God doesn't want everybody. Yes, he does. But God doesn't want everybody who can just get by. And I think that's why people say, well, why doesn't God make it easy on us? He doesn't. He's not going to. He didn't make it easy. You'd think he didn't make it easy on Adam and Eve. Why? Because the devil was there. So even though God says, this seems like a very easy thing to do, he puts in us this freedom to make a choice, right or wrong. And I like that passage, Emmanuel. It's not burdensome. It's not meant to weigh us down. He put up, and maybe you saw that 1 John 5:3. And there's another translation that says it's not grievous. Basically, that word there says it's not going to be so difficult that we can't do it. It's not going to be so hard. It's not going to be so grievous that we say, I can't do that, so I'm not even going to try. But he puts that word in there so we know that it's not going to be, oh, this is just kind of really easy. Everybody can. No, they can't. No, they can't. Everybody can't because they don't want to. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying they can't if they wanted to, but they can't because they don't want to. And that's, of course, that's kind of the devil getting in there. You think about Job. What did the devil say about Job? He said, the only reason you do it is because you take care of it. You don't have to worry about anything. Well, then what if he has to worry about something? He still stayed faithful. Well, what if you take all that away from me? He stayed faithful. What if you harm himself? He still stayed faithful. He had some questions for God, but God says, Job is my faithful servant because no matter what, he's going to do what I ask him to do. Not everybody's like that. Not everybody's like that. Did that even come close to answering your question? Christopher, did that answer your question? I hope so. If not, we'll work on it some more. So,
Yes, please. Thank you.
thank you for the question.
Brother Gene, can I add something as well?
Please.
I think first John chapter 5 verse 3 is a great verse to show that. So Emmanuel, great verse for that. But I think more so what makes it hard for us is understanding that our weaknesses are in play, and so it's more so a challenge for us. God's law, God's law is usually straightforward, but
Mhm.
we have to deal with our own weaknesses and stuff that we don't want to have to deal with. And so we're kind of fighting with that. And I think, when Paul is talking in the book of Romans, Romans chapter 5, you can either follow the example of Adam and go pursuing after that sin, or you can pursue a life of righteousness, which is following after Christ. And I think even when he goes into Romans chapter 7, Paul says, I fight with this. I fight with this understanding of what the law says and understanding what I need to do. But at the same time, my mind, my body tells me to do something different. And I think that's the great thing that we see in the last part of that verse. I don't want to butcher it. It says, I thank God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then, with the mind, I myself serve the law of God, but with the flesh, the law of sin. And he goes there in verse 1 of chapter 8. Now there is no condemnation in those who are in Christ Jesus, who not walk according to the flesh, but instead according to the Spirit. And
Yeah.
I'm not trying to preach. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I think the Lord understood because of our weaknesses, because of our free will, that this was going to be a challenge for us. And I mean, we should be more than grateful because of his grace. But understanding his grace, it should motivate us more to do the will of the Father, knowing how he has sympathy for us.
That's a good point. You think about it. When you think about, if we didn't have weaknesses, we'd never know how strong we are, or we wouldn't know how strong we could be. And so, and of course, we have help with our weaknesses. Satan's right there to poke us.
Right.
He's right there to help us be weak. He helped Adam and Eve be weak. They were strong. Can you imagine God says, okay, you got this whole garden. You can do what you want to. You can eat what you want to, whenever you want to, however you want to. It doesn't make a difference. But you can't eat of that one tree. I know I don't know everything about human behavior, but I know if I was sitting there and I was Adam, I'd say, that ain't a problem, God. One tree? No. That's not a big deal there. But what did they do? They ate of it because they had a weakness. Well, do you want to be like this instead of like this? Do you want to improve yourself? Oh, I never thought about it from that standpoint. Well, sure. Well, then go ahead and eat. So they found out they had a weakness, but they also found out how strong they weren't. And I think we have to do that. I like that illustration though out of Romans. We do have to deal with the weaknesses. And when God created man and said, "You're going to get choices," well, there's where he knew. That's why when it says that he was crucified before the foundation of the world, before God ever said, "Let there be light," it was already planned, because he knew when he created man and gave him the freedom to choose that he's going to mess it up. So that's a good point. I appreciate that. Thank you. Stealing from a traveler. The gleaning of the field. I'd use my grandfather. There's so many agricultural illustrations and laws in the Bible, and I learned so many. I learned so much from my grandfather about that because of the way he did, and my uncle too. But they would leave the outer row. And I thought, well, he didn't pick the corn on the outer row around the fence because he didn't want to get into the fence with the corn picker. Well, that wasn't it. He left that for when he got through, he turned the pigs loose in the field. That left some corn. We had deer. The deer would come in there and eat. The animals that ate and survived on corn, he left that outside row for them. Well, God says this, okay, when you come into your neighbor's vineyard, and we're going to talk about the gleaning pretty soon, but here he's talking about when you travel, you had the right, God-given right, to pick a few grapes, or you had the right to take a few heads of grain and eat it along the way. Because they just usually, when they traveled, didn't pack a lunch with them. And so, it wasn't the right to harvest. It also, they had the responsibility. Now, they couldn't go in and just start harvesting and put it in a basket or put it in a box and take it home with them. That wasn't allowed. But they could, with their hands, pick a few heads of grain or a few grapes. We know about Luke, Luke the 6th chapter, I believe. The disciples or the apostles were in there, and they took it, rubbed the husk off of it, and and ate it, and they got condemned for it. Why do your disciples break the Sabbath? Well, they didn't break the Sabbath; they ate. You know, but you know, the advantage was not to abuse. That's what he was talking about there. Don't He's telling the owners of the property, don't be so greedy or selfish that you're not willing to share in some way. You think about, we're going to get into this a little bit later. Boaz and Ruth, but that's kind of a different kind of law there. What it did is it said, okay, you want to eat some grapes, eat them in the vineyard. Don't grab a bunch of clusters and take off, go out of the vineyard with them. Those who wanted to grind and wanted to have a harvest, well, you plant your own field. Don't take advantage of that person in that vineyard or in that field. And again, it's the concept of sharing. And God called it stealing. Don't steal from a traveler. If they're hungry and it's just to feed them, then don't take them to court over it. I think this is what the law was talking about there in chapter 23. Again, now we get into 24. Again, here's all of these laws that are going to be required when they get into the promised land. They had no fields now. They had no vineyards now. They had none of these things that they're going to kind of inherit because God's given it to them when they get into the promised land. So this is something that he wants them to know before they ever get in there. Now, Deuteronomy 24, the law of divorce, and there's other laws that are involved there, but you have the law of divorce, remarriage, divorce, marriage, and remarriage. If you look there, it says according to these laws, divorce was allowed in Israel, but regulated. Is that the way God set it up? No. He did not set it up that way according to Matthew 19. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because in our world, you're going to run into that a lot. Marriage, divorce, and remarriage. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. I was privileged to sit in a 5-night debate between Brother Jim Waldron and Brother Olin Hicks back in 1977, a long time ago. There in Carnes, Tennessee. And it was on this subject. Hicks taking what we call the Bales doctrine, and Brother Waldron taking the biblical view of it. And it's interesting. We're going to talk a little bit about that. According to the laws, God said man's going to do it. How many times has God said, here's my law, but I know what man's going to do? We just talked about what man's going to do. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to regulate it. And he's going to regulate this dissolving of a marriage when they get into the promised land. And the legislation is not commanding, or is it condemning divorce in general, but regulating its practice for Israel, ancient Israel. All right, Jesus is going to get into it in Matthew 19 when he talks about how to deal with it. It was never the preferred option. It seems like in our world today, well, we're going to try this, and if it don't work, we'll just get a divorce. That's not the way God intended it. The Hebrew word translated divorce has the idea of hewing it off or cutting it apart. And it's kind of like an amputation. That's where they got this concept of this word. You know, think about Genesis 2, verse 24. Leave father, mother, and cleave to his wife, and those two shall become one flesh. So they get the idea of that. Now what you've done is you've cut the man from the woman in a divorce. That's the idea of that word there. And there's going to be a lot of different ideas. I've run into people who said that that is so violent, the cutting off, that is so violent that it can't be done at all. Well, other admits it's a remedy for extreme cases. You're going to get all kinds of ideas. But here's Israel. And they get in there, putting away a wife, and God said, if that's what you're going to do, here's my regulations. You will have to give her a certificate of divorce. It wasn't going to be enough for them just to declare we're divorced. I don't want her anymore. It had to be recognized from a legal standpoint, just as the marriage had been, as far as the marriage was concerned. So the certificate of divorce had to be a legal document, and it must be properly issued, and it had to be properly served. Put it in her hand. Okay. We still kind of go by that in our court system. If a divorce is made, you go through a lawyer, and the lawyers get together, and this is written out and that's written out, and she gets a copy and you get a copy, and it's sealed, it's in the court system, and all of those different things. But listen to what it says. You're giving her a certificate of divorce because she finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found some uncleanness or indecency in her. The technical or legal expression for that in the original language just simply means something that is impure. Well, yeah, it couldn't be read for any reason. It had to be founded on two important clauses. Number one, some uncleanness, and also the fact that it was impure, but it also had to be something that you got from you did it from a legal standpoint. All right, okay, you're done. I'm done with you. Just leave me alone. So there were, what I could find, there were some of the Jewish rabbis that defined uncleanness as, and I don't know how they did this because it has to be something like impure. they said that it was defined as something that just didn't please the husband. He didn't like it. Some rabbis taught that if the wife burned the breakfast, that displeased him, and he could give her a right of divorcement. Or if he found a more attractive woman, because he thought she all of a sudden got ugly, you know, then he could divorce her. So, anything that God gives us sometimes, man has a tendency to take and run with it and come up with his own laws anyway. So that's what he's talking about. Now, when you go over to Matthew, the 19th chapter, there beginning, I think at verse 3 and following, here's Jesus carefully and properly defining what uncleanness meant back in Deuteronomy 24. He said, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another woman commits adultery. All right. So Jesus explained that uncleanness referred to sexual immorality, not burning breakfast, not finding somebody different, not thinking, well, I'm just tired of you. Using a broad term, he's referring to the sexual sin, which includes, but is not actually restricted to, sexual intercourse with a person not your wife or not your spouse. Again, it implies the meaning of sexual immorality, literally the nakedness of a thing. That's the word there. It's a shame. It's a disgrace. And Isaiah takes that word in Isaiah 20 and verse 4 and translates it naked. Samuel, in 1 Samuel 20 verse 30, he translates that word shame. So if a husband found some uncleanness in his spouse, he had the right. Now, here's the thing. He had the right. He did not have to. I've had, over the years, I've had people come and talk about this, and they'd say, well, my spouse cheated on me, and I guess I have to get a divorce. No, you don't. You don't have to. You have the right to if it's legitimate, if it's but that doesn't mean you have to get a divorce. And here you don't. He had the right to give her writing of divorce divorce, but he didn't have to. And he was not. There was no obligation there. Well, she did this, and so I have to put her away. It has to be the idea carried with it that the spouse. Now, let's take, we're talking about the husband. Well, what about it's the other way around? The wife. Well, here's the thing. If they were so troubled at the sexual immorality that had been committed, that they could not look on that other person with any type of favor in their eyes, then you could go ahead with it. If you just, I can't look at her. I can't look at him. I can't live with him. I can't do this. Again, that's kind of iffy in my mind, because I think God has given us the ability to do whatever we want to do if we want to do it. So maybe I couldn't look on her at that time, But can I maybe do it later? I don't know, but that was kind of what he was talking about there. Man, Moses in here, if you go back to Matthew 19, Moses is saying there, because of the hardness of your heart, I can't do this. I can't do this. He permitted them to give their wives, husbands, a writing of divorce. So you think about it. Here's a possibility: if the man or the woman did not have a hard heart, they would have never committed sexual immorality against their spouse in the first place, and there's no need for it. But that's where the hard heart comes in. And again, in my mind, if the husband did not have hardness in his heart, he could forgive. A penitent wife, okay? I've seen cases, maybe you have too. There was infidelity, there was forgiveness, and infidelity, again, forgiveness. Well, after a while, it just can't go. The heart gets so hard, I can't do that anymore. So I think that may be a little bit of what he's talking about there. God knows that there is going to be hardness in our hearts, and it would be either way, but both in the offending or the offended parties. So that's why he's granting Moses to allow this certificate of divorcement to be made. During the time that the Lord was on earth, there were some of the rabbis that were teaching it was the duty, and this goes back to what I said a while ago, it was the duty of the man to divorce his wife. You had to do that. No. Moses and Jesus clearly taught that God permitted it. He did not demand it. And so if someone has biblical grounds for divorce, according to what Jesus said, then they have the right. They don't have to, but they have the right to divorce. And I think, but what I think where you have to be careful, and this was a lot of the debate, and there was a man by the name of Roy Deaver. I think he was from Texas. Roy came back and to Tennessee and helped Brother Jim. Brother Waldron was a missionary, and he came back for a few years to teach in the East Tennessee School of Preaching and Missions, which is now the Southeast School of Biblical Studies or something like the Bible Institute or whatever. And I had him as an instructor. But Brother Deaver had not debated, but he had given a lesson at the Harding School, Harding University, on this subject, and he came back and helped Jim Walford. One of the things in the debate was First Corinthians 7, and it had to do with verse 15. According to the Bible, Jesus gave permission to divorce for only one grounds, and that was sexual immorality. Well, Hicks took the position, and of course, J.D. Bales, who came out with this concept in the first place, took the position that it was that marriage was a covenant relationship. This only this that Jesus was talking to, he was only talking to a Christian married to a Christian. So anything that happened prior to these people becoming a Christian didn't count. Well, of course, Jim said, well, what if she'd been married 10 times before we got married, and then she was unfaithful to me after we became a Christian? And Hicks said, his rebuttal was, it doesn't make any difference if she was married 80 times. It's a covenant passage, which simply meant nothing counted prior to, he was only talking to Christians married to Christians. Well, that didn't work. Then he came up with the concept of 1 Corinthians 7, there in verse 15, with this concept. It says there that, let me find it. Yet if the unbelieving one leaves, let him leave. The brother or sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God has called us to peace. So he said, there's another reason that you could divorce your wife. Or you could divorce, you say you married a non-Christian. And they left. Well, you can divorce them and be free to marry again. That's not that's not what that passage teaches. Because if you think about it, the word bondage, there's two words for bondage. One of them is talking about the marriage bond, and that's in Romans 7, not Romans, Romans 7, verse 2, and also in 1 Corinthians 7, verses 27 and 39. The words used there are talking about the marriage bond. Read it and you'll see that that's what he's talking about. Well, it is a Greek word, deo, comes from doulou, but it is a Greek word, deo. The word bondage in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 15 is a Greek word, douletai. And it comes from a word that, in other words, that word is used 133 times in the New Testament. The douletai is used for bound or bondage or something like that. But that Greek word is used 133 times. And it never, ever refers to the marriage bond unless you want to make it here. Well, I don't think that God is that inconsistent that he's going to say, oh, well, it didn't mean that 132 times, but it does mean that here. All it was meaning there is here's this non-Christian. And if I leave, if you want me to stay, you're going to have to quit being a Christian. No, you don't. I'm not under bondage. I'm not under bondage to follow you if it means I'm leaving. I'm not bound to do everything possible to keep this marriage going if it means leaving my Christianity. That's what it's talking about. That's what I'm not under bondage to do. And I think if you look at all the other 132 times, you get that concept. But here's the thing, people, they come up with so many different things but Jesus said, why did Moses give them a writing of divorcement? Well, because they had hard hearts. There were things that said, so you can't just say, okay, I don't like you anymore. We're divorced. No, you're going to have to make it legal. It's got to be something that caused that impurity. And Jesus said that's going to be sexual immorality. And so it was very simple. That book, it was published. It's the Hicks Waldron debate. And if you find it somewhere, I was talking to my son. He had a question for me here a few months ago. He said, "Dad, they're asking me this." I said, "Well, in the Hicks Waldron debate, this is what it says." He said, "I think I got that book." Well, as a father would to his son, well, then why don't you read it? So he did and answered the question. But I think this is the same here. God says, look, man's going to come up with 100 different reasons. I don't like her anymore. She dyed her hair pink, or whatever, some frivolous thing. Instead of working at a marriage, and even if there is some impurity, instead of being forgiven, if you can, then get on with the marriage. I think this is what God wants us to do here, and because of this passage, some people think that they can just do well. We're going to get married, all right, and if it don't work, well, we'll just get a divorce. And we've made it so easy to do that that's what happens. So, any comment or question on that concept? I didn't mean to get off on all kinds of other stuff, but in our world, that's a very prevalent thing. Divorce for any reason. Jesus tried to tell them to start with, hey guys, what did it say in the beginning? It said one man for one woman for life. Jesus said, but I say unto you, well, who are you? Well, I'm God. If she has committed sexual immorality, you can do that. If you can't live with her anymore. All right. The law of marriage, I guess, it was so strong that, okay, here he goes on with it a little bit there, and he says, okay, if a divorced woman marries again, and she could, evidently, because he says if she marries again, and her second marriage, the man dies, or she divorces him, or he divorces her, you can't go back to the first one. That's pretty strong. Now, I think Hosea is pretty much a good example here. If you look there at Hosea, the first 3 chapters, here's a man who refused to divorce his wife. Did he have every right? Yeah, he sure did. She played the harlot with everybody. She was very unfaithful. So he was in the position to divorce her, but he took her back. He found her and he took her back, and it was to show us and show Israel at that time Okay. I was a husband to you, Israel, and you played the harlot, uh, but I didn't put you away. I take you back. I'll take you back. And I think this is, if you go back, if you go read uh, Jeremiah 3, I think the first few verses there, that's what it was. It was something God wants marriage to be irrevocable. He doesn't want it to happen, but he understands us as humans because he said, you know, don't make it a habit. You messed up, you messed up again. You can't go back to the other one. Uh, and I think it seems that it might be a good thing for the first husband, and that we would think that. Now, the question comes up. Okay, what if I put her away? Okay, I put my wife away. Uh, Legal. She was unfaithful, and so I have a right to put her away. Well, she doesn't get married. I don't get married, and 6 months, a year down the road, we start talking, and we start getting together, and we want to get married again. Can we? Why not? There was never any other marriages there. She did not marry again. I did not marry, which I had every right to. This is hyperbole. I'm just using me and my wife. We've been married almost 61 years. So I'm just using that as an illustration. But would it not be what God might want to see that marriage salvaged? There's something to think about, and I've run into that several times over the years, uh, and so the present law, uh, you know, that this law made, and I think if you bring it over it into what Jesus said in Matthew 19, this makes getting a divorce a very serious affair. And in talking to people about getting married, okay, doing marriage counseling, and I've done some of that over the years, got a lot of it over the years. I talked to them about the what ifs, uh, the weakness of the flesh. Jeremiah talked about that earlier. It is weak from time to time, and we have to be careful. But uh, I talked to them first of all about why do you want to do it in the first place. I'm not trying to talk them out of it. Well, I kind of am. Why do you want to get married? Go ahead. I finally saw the little hand. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeremiah. Turn it on.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt your thought.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay. I was just saying what I see in Deuteronomy 24 and Matthew 19, and it's something I kind of struggle with when the man puts away his wife, sends her out with a certificate of divorce. And unless you can bring up another example for me, please do. I don't see that man who put his wife away remarrying. And not saying I'm not trying to add to the text, I'm not trying to take away. I don't see that example. We just see the example of the woman marrying again. And it just seems interesting when we get to Jesus in Matthew chapter 19. Um, we see we see there that, well, I'll read it. I don't want to put words out there. And it says, and I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. I struggle with this because when I look here in Matthew chapter 19, um, I've heard some brothers say that you have the right to remarry again, and I don't see that in the text, and I kind of I struggle with that. Can you maybe show where someone is allowed to marry again because of their spouse committed adultery, or maybe am I not looking at the text correctly?
I think that's a good question, and I think what you have to take into consideration is if if I marry somebody, and I think this is God looking at it from this standpoint, and I'll have to go back and rethink some of this. But here is an innocent party, and God has never punished an innocent party. I want to be married. Okay. My wife was unfaithful to me. I forgave her. She was unfaithful to me. I can't continue to forgive her, and I put her away. Okay. Now, then it just talks about this one that's put away. All
Mhm.
right. If somebody marries her, they're both adulterers, because in God's sight they're committing adultery here. Why is God punishing? And I think this is in the word accept. I do not have the right to put her away except for, when has God ever punished an innocent party? And I think everybody looks at it from that standpoint. That's the way Waldron looked at it. And Brother Deaver and all the guys that I grew up looking at, who were a lot smarter than me. Uh, they looked at it from the standpoint is God has never punished an innocent party, but He wanted to make sure that he's innocent, that he is innocent. So look at it. If you're determined to put her away, you better be innocent. You better be doing it for the right reason before you do anything else. And I think the accept word there that Jesus uses says, here's an innocent party, and I'm not going to punish that innocent party. And I think that's the way they look at it.
Okay.
Otherwise, that it doesn't seem, God is just and God is fair. And if He is just, well, that's the same word, fair or just. If God is just, that's not fair, God. I want to live with somebody. I want to have a wife. But that one can't be it because she don't want me. You know, she's, it's just, it's like, maybe she puts me away for no reason and goes out and finds her somebody else. Well, I want to be married. And so why would God, if He is fair, why would God punish that innocent party? So I think that's the way they look at it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for answering.
Mm-hmm. Hope it helps. But anyway, this is, you think about it. If people paid attention, of course, God, if people paid attention to what God said, we'd be a whole lot better off anyway. But if people would pay attention to this law, he's talking about Israel. If Israel paid attention to that law, there wouldn't be divorce in the first place. Now, second of all, if that second law coming in there, you can't go back to the first one if God allowed this second marriage, all right, if he put her away for anything and she married somebody else, now if he divorced her, she can't go back to the first one, or if she just left the first one, or whatever, it would strengthen. It always, God, every law God gives is to strengthen something. And I think this law is simply to strengthen the marriage bond. And that's why Jesus said from the beginning, it wasn't so. And so, but because he knows you're going to have a hard heart, don't just be frivolous with it. Make sure you do it according to the way he said. Because if you don't, what you're doing, again, you're going into this new land. It says you're going to bring sin on the land. You know, unchastity defiled the land. And it's found in several other passages. Leviticus talked about it. I think the book of Numbers, you find it. I know Jeremiah talked about it in Jeremiah 3. So Hosea, again, the concept there. You know, so that I think that's we probably. I'm not sure. Well, we may not be preaching enough on the home and the sanctity of the home. I'm not saying us, but I don't think it's preached enough. But anyway, that's my opinion. The law of honoring marriage. There was a similar principle. Remember previously. Back in Deuteronomy 20, there was a man that was exempt from military for a year to strengthen the home. That was the whole purpose. This is the way God said, I'm going to honor marriage. What I'm going to do, I'm going to honor it. I'm going to bless the marriage. And he does not have to start. He doesn't have to go to military service for at least 1 year. That way he can enjoy the bond of marriage. He can also begin a family, establish descendants, and all of those different things. Bring happiness to his wife there. So that's really an important job for every husband. You know, what did Jesus say? The disciples find their lives by losing them. You know, not trying to be mushy or anything. You know, the husband is going to find happiness if he sets as his purpose to bring happiness to the wife, and it would be vice versa if you're talking to a lady. You know, that I heard one preacher say one time, that doesn't mean that the husband focuses on pleasing the wife's every opinion or preference, that she's always right. I hear husbands do this. I've probably done it several times myself. That the first thing that a new husband needs to learn, or a husband prior to getting married, you need to learn two words: yes, ma'am, or you're right. And so, but that's not the case. It just allowing. He's the head of the wife, as the Lord is the head of the church, according to Ephesians 5. So he emphasizes that essential oneness, and I think that's what these laws are all about too, between the husband and wife, and on that principle, the husband cannot. I don't think there's any way. This is in first opinions, but The husband cannot make his wife happy without bringing happiness into his own life. That's not possible. Like I said, I've been married almost 61 years, and I'm the happiest when I see my wife happy. If she's miserable, I'm miserable. And that's back for what I try not to be the one that makes her miserable, but if that, and I think that's the way it's supposed to be. Uh, a wife, and I try to teach young people in the church that are wanting to get married, uh, and the men especially, a wife that is happy through godly leadership of the husband is the very foundation for a happy home. And I think that's what we need to, you think about Solomon. Solomon uh, said, Solomon said on various occasions, it's easier to live by yourself than live with a contentious woman. And I, you understand that. He said, love in the corner of a roof is better than the whole house with a contentious woman. He said that in several different ways, but I think this is what he's talking about there. Okay. Oh, man, I got to talking. It's almost 3 o'clock. Hey guys, take a break. Take about 10 minutes, and we'll come back and get into the other areas of laws. Uh, taking pledges and things like that. So uh, take 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and continue on in this chapter.
Gene, how far is Calhoun, Georgia from you?
It is on the other side between here and Chattanooga. It's 95 miles to from here to Atlanta, and then another 100 miles to Chattanooga. So we're probably talking about 150 miles.
Okay. I I got a brother who's a part of the house to house, heart to heart, and I guess he's a part-time minister at the Calhoun congregation there. And
Who is that?
his name's Rod Selman.
Rod speaking for us Sunday morning.
Oh, are you serious?
We supported him when he went back to Cyprus this past year.
Yeah, yeah. Ironically, he has me on the list to go for this year, so I'm kind of excited for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's supposed to come. Uh, he said, well, we gave him the money for him and I think three other guys to go to Cyprus last year.
Hmm.
Or I guess, yeah, last year. When last year? It's been a while.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was last year.
And uh, he, I think in the process, he was moving congregations uh, and hadn't been able to come and give us a follow up on it. So he's going to be there Sunday.
Good deal. Well, you
Yeah.
need to tell him I said hi.
Well, I won't be there.
Oh, never mind.
I'm going to be in Claxton, but
Okay.
I'll tell Jerry to tell him hi.
Okay.
I sure will. One of the other elders, uh, and I'll tell him to make sure he says hi for you. Uh,
Good.
it's interesting because there's another young man that's going to do an internship, I think, this coming summer. That's at Freed Hardeman University now.
Hmm.
He and one of our young ladies from the congregation see each other. In fact, they're leaving to go to Belgium today to study overseas for the rest of this year.
Nice.
I can't remember his name. I haven't met him yet, but he said he was, and I think there's only one congregation in Calhoun. And so I think this young man's going to be doing an internship for the summer while he's out of school.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a small world.
Yeah, I know.
Unbelievable. When you started talking about the minute you started saying that with heart to heart and house to house and all that, and I said, I think I know who he's talking about. I like Rod.
Me
He's
too.
Yeah. Well, he was in school here in Dahlonega, which is North Georgia. That's where he went to college, and that's where he was converted.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was telling me about that.
Yeah.
I was telling him about GSD. I said, man, you should do it. You know, if you're in ministry, you might as well just continue your education for ministry. And GST is a good spot.
Man, I wish I was going to be there, but I'm going to be in Claxton. I'd really give him a hard time. I really was impressed uh, with the way he goes about things.
Mhm.
It's kind of like, I told the other elders, I said, we may, if we're going to support him, may have to put a bridle on him and holler, whoa, every once in a while, because he's a go-getter.
Yeah,
He really is. So I'll make sure Jerry says hi for you.
good deal.
We're talking about the taking pledges, uh, and they said for a pledge you could give anything, but it says there's certain things that you cannot or not allowed to give, and that was not you're not allowed to take as a pledge. This is the borrower. Uh, I'm going to give you a certain amount of money, but you need to give me certain things. They were not allowed to take any part of the millstone. It didn't make a difference whether it was the lower part or the upper part, because that was what was used and essential to the family's livelihood, their ability to provide regular food for the family. So it was forbidden to take a millstone as a guarantee for a loan. And again, this is, we're talking about a physical thing there, but here's a warning from God that don't take advantage of each other in at any time, but especially don't take advantage of each other in a time of great need. God never intended for man to unfairly profit from the poverty or the difficulty of somebody else. And I think, so he's taking one's living as a pledge. And you can take anything, non-essential items could be taken to guarantee a payment for a loan. Now, again, interest could not be charged to an Israelite in need, but a pledge could be taken. It's kind of like, well, here's the collateral to guarantee I'm going to pay that loan back. So you can't take away a man's ability to provide for his family. All he's doing, if you do that, what you're doing is you're putting him deeper in debt. And that's taking advantage of somebody that should not be taken advantage of. That's what he's talking about. Then you get into kidnapping, punished for kidnapping. The idea of the word there is stealing a life. It was in some circles called social murder. It says if a man is found kidnapping any of his brethren, then he'll die. That's it was done in the ancient world, not so much for return, but for ransom. Okay, it wasn't taken for ransom. Excuse me, I got that backwards. They never really said, okay, we're going to kidnap this person, and in order to get him back, you're going to have to do this. You're going to have to pay us this much money and whatever. It wasn't for that. Mostly, it was to put them into slavery, because they made more money out of selling them into slavery than they could have by demanding a ransom. One of the, I guess, probably the most famous one that was kidnapped and sold was Joseph. If you go back to Genesis 37. So it says that the crime is so serious, social murder, stealing a life. It was so serious before God that God says it demands the death penalty. And that principle, if you go back to Exodus 21, it's the same principle is there. And here's the thing: as Israel carried this out, it helps put away the evil that's going on. It's just like a murderer and the different things that demanded the capital punishment, and also. And like I said, it was mainly they would kidnap to sell them into slavery. God freed Israel from Egypt so they could be free, and to enslave was the reverse of God's purpose in the first place, to give people freedom. So I think this is part of the law there, but it was common in the ancient Near East. It was common to do that, and so that's the law against kidnapping. Leprosy, Leviticus 13 and 14. If you studied Leviticus, you really got into what they had to do and all the different laws there, and how the detail of how God wanted lepers examined, wanted them quarantined. It was such a dreaded disease that God wanted to be very careful about the outbreak of leprosy so it wouldn't become a plague. And when I was in Guyana, we didn't go. We passed. We were not, of course, allowed into. There was a huge leper colony in Guyana, South America. So it's still prevalent in some parts of the world, but the term leprosy and the Greek word covered a lot of different things. Basically, it was anything. It covered a variety of infectious skin diseases. And when I was in Guyana, one of the members there, where we were working one year, was in medical school in Georgetown. And what they do, and they have a very unique program there. You go to Georgetown and you study certain things, and then you go back to your village and you practice that. And you go back and you study more stuff, and then you go back and you can practice that. And he had he kind of explained to us, what he encountered in the leper colony, because he was allowed to go in there and treat some of the, I guess, the less contagious or whatever. And it wasn't a pretty thing. So, and God understood this. But see, leprosy it not only could be in a person, it could be in clothes, it could be in a house. If you get into Leviticus 14, it talks about those things. And if you go back to the 12th chapter of the book of Numbers, remember Miriam led her brother Aaron in a rebellion against their other brother Moses. And for it, God struck her with leprosy. And God, Moses prayed. Moses prayed for her to be healed. Now, there are some that think she was healed immediately, but then she had to be separated for 7 days. But it really doesn't, and others say, well, God let her be a leper for 7 days and then she was healed. But if that was the case, then she had to go to the priest, and then she was still. So whatever it was, she had to go through the process. And I think if somebody as prominent as Miriam was, and that day was quarantined as a leper, then they understood that it was very important that they be quarantined. And somebody said, well, why did God strike her with such a dreaded disease? In the first place, she just didn't like the way Moses was doing things. Well, what she did was she insulted God. She questioned God's decision for her brother to be the leader. She was speaking against God's chosen servant. And his claim that God gave him the authority, and so I think that made it very serious as far as God was concerned. But he did that to her, and so he wants them to understand when they get into the promised land, make sure that you deal with leprosy as is prescribed in Leviticus 13 and 14. Handling a pledge, they're beginning in verse 10, going through verse 13, is talking about you shall not go into a house to get a pledge. Now, what happened is, again, you couldn't charge interest on a loan to the needy, but you could take a pledge. But you couldn't demand the pledge. There's certain things you couldn't take as a pledge. You can't take a millstone or anything that would interfere with his livelihood. But neither could you go in and say, well, you couldn't go into their house and say, I'm going to take that as a pledge. The pledge, when a pledge was taken for a loan, it was received in a way that guarded the dignity of that individual who was getting the loan, who was asking for the loan. The lender couldn't go bursting into somebody's house and say, "I'm taking that." That was not allowed. The borrower delivered a pledge to the lender. And that did several things there. Basically, it protected the privacy of the home. It left the borrower, it gave the borrower a choice of what he wanted to give as a pledge. And okay, I'm going to borrow $1,000 and I'm going to give you a shoe. Well, no, it had to be a legitimate thing, but and it respected the feeling of that person that had to borrow in the first place. I think when you stop and think about it, a person really don't want to have to borrow. It would be great if you never did have to, but borrow for a house or borrow for a car, things like that. But what God is looking at is He's looking at these Israelites, these brothers, brother Israelites, and there's just they're to treat each other with respect and courtesy. And I think this is, that's what prompted this injunction that God puts out here to Moses. If the poor man asks for a loan, he has the right to say, "This is what I'm going to give you as a pledge. I'll get it for you. I will bring it to you." And I think this is what he's talking about there. You think about. There are some things, okay. God didn't condemn the principle of taking a pledge. Just again, He said, "I'm not going to condemn that, but I'm going to regulate it." Again, God regulates a lot of things that He doesn't condemn, but He does regulate it. And one of the things was that assuming the pledge was something that was absolutely necessary, the millstone, a blanket, or a garment. You think about it, often the only pledge a poor man would have would maybe be his cloak or a blanket, which basically was kind of the same thing. It was a wide outer cloak or mantle that was about it said it was about 6 yards long and about 6 feet wide. Now, by day, it was a cloak. They put it over your inner garment. At night, it was a bed covering. You slept with it. It was you either slept on it and wrapped it around you, or you slept in it, and that was that was why you couldn't take it. So, but all right, here's the law. Here's God's regulation of it. You want to give me your blanket. You want to give me your cloak. Okay. I can't keep it overnight. I got to bring it back. Well, you say, what if the loan's not paid off? Well, then you give it back to them the next day. It's just kind of back and forth until the loan's paid for. And again, it's the idea of don't oppress somebody. Don't make somebody oppressed. Those in need were not to be oppressed according to God. That was the concept. And it says that if you do that, you're going to be righteous before God. It's a righteousness. You're treating people how God would want you to treat people, and God kind of looks at it as a good thing, as a good work. And He said He would reward it. So I think this is what he's talking about there. I think it's interesting, because, remember when Jesus said, if somebody takes your coat, give me your cloak also? Well, what he's talking about is the inner and outer garment. But the thing about it is they couldn't keep it overnight. They still had to refine, in a lot of cases. And I think this is why Jesus said what he said. The Jews in several cases didn't act according to this law. They were really contrary to this rule, and they were reproved. I think it's in Amos, the book of Amos. Amos talked about on garments that are taken as a pledge. They stretch it out beside every altar. In other words, they just didn't pay attention to what God said. They just do whatever they wanted to do with it. So that's you have to again, how do you? It goes back to what we call the golden rule. How would you want somebody to treat you? You're in a bad position. You need help. They're willing to help, but be fair about it. I think this is the case here. Verses 14 and 15, paying your workers. You think Luke 10, I think, says the labor is worthy of his hire or worthy of his wages. A servant might be oppressed by not being paid properly. He might be oppressed by unsafe working conditions, or many other ways. And God commanded employers to treat their workers kindly, but fairly. Now, what the deal was is they were to be paid at the end of the day, basically because they needed to feed their family, and so they were to be paid at the end of every day, and lest they cry. It says, lest they cry out, excuse me, against the Lord. The Lord is very concerned about the oppressed. If you think about everything that we've looked at in the book of Deuteronomy, or everything you look at in the Bible, the Lord is really concerned about those who are oppressed, the poor, the fatherless, the widows. You think about it could be, that even they were withholding their wages. That they can't do that. It doesn't make it, say, well, they're just a hireling. They're just a worker. People looked at them as a low socioeconomic situation status, but it didn't make any difference. God says that's no excuse to deny him his rights or deny him fair treatment. So this is why that I think that's that statement, lest he cry out against the Lord. The Lord knows it, and that's not going to favor the person that's withholding from the person to oppress them at all. 16 talks about bearing your own sin. Ezekiel talks about that, Ezekiel 18. But it's a warning against injustice. And a person who is put to death, if it's a sin that demands death, it better be him that sinned. If you're going to put him to death, it better be him that did it. That's what he's talking about. Everyone is responsible for his or her own sin. Father can't be blamed or responsible for the sin of their grown children. A child cannot be blamed or responsible for the sin of their parents. That was kind of common among heathen nations, the Persians especially, and also I think the Macedonians. Children and families of criminals were many times also put to death. One prime example of that, which was allowed, is, remember in Esther, the 9th chapter, you remember Mordecai and Esther and the story there, and Haman was trying to get Mordecai hanged and all of these different things. And what Esther did to go before Ahasuerus and the king. And, she exposed that. Esther did to, being the queen, she exposed that to Ahasuerus. And he said, there in, I think it's verse 13 and 14, not sure, it's in the 9th chapter. But what was her request? That Haman be hanged and his 10 sons. Okay, so that was allowed there, and so we know it was taken. We know it took place because he said, "Oh, okay, that's fine." So that's Persia. The Macedonians kind of did the same thing. We know that in the situation with Achan, after after the walls fell in Jericho, and they were not allowed to take any spoils, and he did, the family was destroyed. Well, that tells me if God is a fair God, they knew about it and they were a party to it, and that's why that took place. Other than that, this is the command, and I think there's a principle that is involved there. To me, I think sometimes parents automatically blame themselves, or somebody else automatically blames a parent for a wayward child. Though they might have, might not have. It isn't always the case. The child may just gone bad and been raised to know right and wrong, just that ain't gonna do it. But it had to be the parents' fault. Well, I don't think so. And I think here, each shall bear his own sin. Did they have to? No, but they did it anyway. And so I think you got to be careful there when you do that principle. There are instances, again, like I said, where God demanded it, and that was Achan, where the whole family, I believe, had some. Well, they shared the guilt there, and God did that. Verses 17 and 18. Again, here, God kind of repeats himself sometimes in things, but sometimes we have a tendency to forget things. And so here we have a command to be fair, to be compassionate. The legal rights of the protected classes. Like I said, God protected a lot of. He protects everybody with his laws, but it says, "You shall not pervert justice due to the stranger or the fatherless or the alien or the fatherless, depending on the orphan or whatever. And so the God says, based on my compassion, I was compassionate to you, and so I need you to be compassionate to your fellow man. So you couldn't take a widow's garment, the cloak, in a pledge. Again, he's already talked about that, but he talks about it again. But it was allowed for others. You could take it from somebody, but not her, not a widow. You couldn't take that as a pledge. It's not take it and give it back to her at night, but you just couldn't take it, period. So, Israel is reminded over and over and over again. Think about it. Think how much God has done for you, and you should be as compassionate as he was. You were disadvantaged. God was compassionate to you. And you need to be a people who are going to be compassionate to other people. There was a third, there was a Pharaoh that lived between 1004 and 992 BC, that was the Pharaoh, and he wrote a book. He didn't write a book, but he had a collection of moral and social and ethical guidelines. And it's called The Teachings of Amenhotep. And he says in that, he said, you are not to steal from the poor, you're not to cheat the cripple, nor are you to poach on the widow's field. And I thought, that sounds a whole lot like Solomon. Well, it is. It's not like Solomon. Solomon wrote, if you go read Solomon's Proverbs, he talks about the same thing. But so it was going on. You bring it into the New Testament. Paul is talking to the Galatian brethren and of us, of course, us Christians. He said, as you have opportunity, do good to most everybody. No, do good to all men, especially the household of faith, but do good to all men. That's fair treatment. And part of that fair treatment, and we mentioned that just a moment ago, part of that fair treatment was to leave behind some of the harvest for the poor. The fatherless, it says the stranger, the fatherless, the widows. This is one preacher one time referred to it as God's support program. We have a lot of in our country. We have a lot of support programs that are available. And he said this was God's support program for the poor in Israel, giving them the right as a gleaner. Farmers were instructed, do not completely harvest your fields, so that there would be some left for those poor people to help them. If you harvested it and dropped it, Okay, you harvested a sack of grain or a sheaf of grain, and you dropped it on the ground. No, just leave it. You couldn't pick it back up. If you dropped an ear of corn, or you dropped a cluster of grapes or whatever in harvesting, you had to leave it on the ground. If you forgot, you gleaned the field. You harvested the field, and you got home and said, "Oh, I left some grapes out there, or I left a bundle of wheat out there, or what barley or whatever it might have been." You couldn't go back and get it. You just left it for the poor. And then, of course, remember we talked about this back in the fact that you couldn't. Every 3 years, the poor were supported by Israel's tithe, and so again, there's Boaz and Ruth. Boaz made sure he left something for Ruth to glean out of his field, and it's a way of helping the poor. A command, of course, it is, but it's basically a command to the farmer. Be generous. God's blessing you with a harvest. You need to be generous and help the people who were not able to harvest this, or were not able. They were poor, but it also encouraged the poor to be active. The law didn't say, well, whatever's left in your field when you get through, just bundle it up and take it to the poor man. No, let them come and get it. And I think this is what it's talking about. So it was a concept of dignity. It allowed this poor person to come and take care of their needs. And of course, the generosity of the farmer. But I think this is what he's talking about. I guess it permitted the recipient, this poor person, to salvage his honor, and while at the same time giving the landowner a sense of helping. And it showed the landowner, don't get this sense of arrogant control over the lives of the dependent. And I think this is what it's talking about. I think you've probably met these people that they do. They want to do for everybody. They want to do for everybody. What can I do? And they try to do everything that they can for everybody that they can do for. But if you go to them, no, I don't need any help. They won't let anybody help them. I don't know whether there was it worked out okay. I had a couple when I was actually in Virginia, and man, they were just doing for everybody. But if you ever asked them, to be able to do for them, no, we don't, So I just set them down. They said, we don't know what else to do. Can you go talk to them? I said, sure. I'm pretty blunt from time to time. I'm not ugly. I'm just straightforward. And I set them down and I said, you all are doing for everybody all the time. And I said, you don't know how everybody appreciates that. But I said, there's a problem. Well, what's that? What's the problem? I said, you don't let anybody do for you. Do you enjoy doing for people? They said, oh yeah, we love to do for people. I said, so you get a benefit out of helping other people? He said, yeah. I said, well, well, then why don't you let other people get a benefit out of helping you? And I don't think they ever got over it but they did allow. In fact, the man had a surgery, or I don't know whether it was some type of illness, and he couldn't do the yard, and some of the guys from the church jumped in there. You know, they went out and said, can we mow, can we mow your yard? Can we do this, do that? No, they did it anyway. So, and she understood what that was about. But that, I think, that's a two-way street. If you're going to do, then sometimes you need to allow to do. And I think that may be what God was talking about there. Deuteronomy 25. Guess what? More laws. More subjects, but more laws. Couple of laws. One protects criminals, and the other one protects animals. There was a limit. And if you look at Deuteronomy, lost my place. Deuteronomy 25, the first 3 verses there. Here's a dispute between men, and they go to court to let the judges decide their case. And so here's the situation. Again, God's directing this. He gave Israel a legal system, and he's going to regulate it, though. He's going to regulate the punishment. He talks about, if you can settle it yourself, then settle it. But if you can't, then you take it to the judges, and you will abide by their decision. Then he also regulated the punishment that went along with the crime. And they again had the same thing. The punishment should fit the crime. And so this is basically what he's talking about here in civil cases. We're talking about a civil case. We're not talking about here's a guy that murdered somebody else, and they're talking about just something that two people got into disagreement over, and they didn't know how to settle it. So the judges are going to get involved in it there, and it was the duties of the. And then you think about it, he made it very simple. As far as the Bible was concerned, he made it very simple for them to, the judges, they were to approve and encourage what was right. They were to condemn, though, what was wrong, as far as the guilty is concerned, because, thinking about Romans 13, verse 4. They're there so that we are protected, that we have our rights, and to penalize the righteous, the right, and to reward the wrong. That's not what Paul was talking about, and that's not what God was talking about. And so if they decided, excuse me, that this criminal, the guilty man, deserved to be beaten, right? It's not a capital punishment, but he deserved punishment. Then in this dispute, then if he was found to be the guilty party and was to receive physical punishment, then God regulated it. For example, if they were to be beaten, the law did not require 40 lashes, but it couldn't go over 40 lashes. I mean, the punishment, you can't say, well, he was wrong, so he gets 40 lashes. No, he might have only, what might have been right was only 5. What might have been right was only 10, but it couldn't go over 40. Not allowed to. So that what that did is a lot of times that would discourage wrongdoing in the first place. You're going to get punished. So, but they would not allow you to go over 40 according to the law, according to God's law. And I was reading I don't even remember where it was, that said the Mohammedans, there are very few lawsuits. And the reason is because they're punished publicly. I had a brother-in-law, my wife's twin sister's husband, my brother-in-law, was in Saudi Arabia, and we're talking about years ago, probably 40 years ago or so, and he was in the marketplace, and he saw it, but a man, he never said what his age was, he just said a man stole something, and they caught him, and they had a kind of a little trial right there, and they, I saw it. The store owner was a store, but in the marketplace, and they issued the punishment right then. They said it wasn't something he wanted to see. They cut off his hand. That would kind of deter anybody else standing around watching that, especially younger people. I better be careful. But that's what they practiced, and this is what God is doing here. Make the punishment fit the crime. I don't know that fit that crime or not, but make the punishment fit the crime so that it deters crime in the next person. And this is what he's talking about there. But God also recognized that punishment could be excessive. It would be kind of like me when my children were growing up. They had a curfew, and they were 5 minutes late. They're supposed to be home at 10 o'clock. Well, it was 10:05. You're late coming in. You're granted for 6 months. That doesn't fit the crime. You're not going out tomorrow night. Or your punishment is, okay, the next time you go out, your curfew's 9:30. But he understood that the punishment had to fit the crime. You think about Paul, 2 Corinthians 11. Remember, he said, I was beaten 5 times. Is it 5 times? I was beaten 5 times by the Jews, minus with 40 stripes minus 1. Well, what that did is I can't go over 40. So just in case I miscounted, I'm going to stop at 39 so I don't have 41. And but that's kind of what he's talking about there. I was beaten with 39 stripes minus 40 stripes minus one. The law said you can't go over 40. Why? God doesn't give anything unless he gives a reason for it. Why do I have to do that way? It says, lest your brother be humiliated. God commanded dignity of even the guilty person. And, that to fight, to beat a man, to flog a man more than his wrong deserved would be basically to treat him like an animal, more than treating him like a man. And it had to do with dignity. God demands fair treatment in everything, even the guilty person. And that's so I think sinful conduct against somebody else is not a sufficient cause to take away that person's dignity. And God understood that. So I think this is why he said, okay, punishment fits the crime, but you can't be excessive with the punishment. Thou shalt not muzzle the ox. The law commanded human treatment, even of an animal, proper human treatment. Now we understand, and you've already probably studied this and read this, and probably preached sermons on it. Grain would be broken away from the husk by having an ox walk on it repeatedly. Basically, they would, and then just would go around in a circle and round in a circle and round in a circle. And they said it is unusually cruel treatment if you don't allow you've got that ox working hard to feed you, help feed you, and you put a muzzle on him where he can't eat while he's treading out the grain. And he couldn't eat of it. And you think about that. The prohibition, it reflects a spirit of mercy. And whether it's talking about a human being or whether it's talking about an animal, it's talking about God's creation. And, the purpose was not only to provide for the ox, which was necessary. You're going to have to feed him anyway. Just let him be eating a little bit as he treads out the corn or the grain. But it was kind of an argument that if you're going to treat an animal that way, you're going to treat the same way, be humane in your treatment of the human. There's a human element, because they're created in the image of God. And, you think about, there's in 1 Corinthians 9, verse 9, again, also in 1 Timothy 5, verse 18, Paul applied that principle to the right of a minister to be supported by the people that he serves. And, under normal circumstances, it would not be right to expect a person to serve a congregation and not receive support from that congregation. So I think, I think that's what he's talking about. It's oxen God is concerned about. No, he's concerned about his creation. And I think that's what they need. That's what we need to be. That's what we need to be careful about. Let's see. Verse 5. family matters. The Levirate law, Levirate marriage, whatever you want to call it. Here's a man, an Israelite, and he dies, and he doesn't have any sons. Well, we know that part of that, okay, here's a man that had daughters. That's all he had. The law was taken care of. Okay, then those belong to her. But this is a man who dies and has no children, but he has no son, and that was basically a tragedy as far as Israel was concerned, because to die without leaving descendants to carry on his name, to give his family inheritance to. So therefore, God says, here's the way it's going to be. If he dies and he has no son, it's the responsibility of one of his brothers, fleshly brothers, to take his widowed wife as his wife and perform the duty of a husband to her. And we call it the Levirate marriage. It comes from an Italian Latin word lever, which means brother-in-law or husband's brother. Usually it would have been the next of kin, the very next brother in line. Now we know it can be handed down if you stop and think about it, because remember when Ruth and Boaz got together, Boaz wanted to marry her, but he didn't have the right because he wasn't the next in line. So he went and asked the next in line for permission, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But that was very prevalent among the Canaanite, the Hittites that lived there, the Assyrians as well. I'm thinking that there are some countries in our world today that still practice that. I'm not exactly sure. I know there are some areas in South America that tribes practice that. I don't know about any other country, but it was a principle which allowed the son from that mother, the widow, to inherit the firstborn son, which she bore. Still, would inherit everything. Not the brother, not any of the descendants of the brother, but that firstborn son there. I don't know. Again, but the legislation was now. What if he didn't? Well, that takes place in the Bible too, by the name of a man by the name of Onan. And if he refused, Onan did. If he refused to take that responsibility, and he, what they did was they took his shoe off, his sandal off, and she spit in his face. I don't think that was literally the concept, that, as far as I could read, that they actually spit in his face. I think the wording there was basically should have been translated, or was better translated, she spit before his face. In other words, she spit on the ground in front of him to humiliate him. And I think this was the case there. But that was you think about it. uh, God, God, God kind of again regulates the laws uh, that that helps. Because he knows that man is going to come up with some weird ideas. And so he says, before you come up with, well, we're going to do it this way or we're going to do it that way, he said, no, this is the way you're going to do it. And again, we talk about Boaz. It was a mark of shame. You should have, but you didn't. So I think this was the case. The shoe, the only thing I could figure out possibly was the shoe was an emblem of power, okay, or control. And by stripping it off, you were taking that power away from him. The authority was represented there. Now he could give it up, and he did. In fact, with Boaz, he gave it up. I don't want that right. Now I don't know whether there was any spitting on the ground. I know that talks about the sandal, but I think this is the case. The law of wives, there in verse 11, the law of wives forbidding to interfere in their husband's fight. And that's, I'm not sure. I've never been in a fight with another human being. Don't want to be in a fight with another human being. I've got beat up a lot, but I think if I got in, if somebody started beating up on me, I think, and then my wife was there, you better hold her back, because she'd probably be right in the middle of it. She'd probably have an advantage, like a ball bat or a golf club, but she's, I mean, that's just the way she is. But they said no. It condemned a woman who interfered in her husband's fight, battling for her husband. He said that's dishonorable. Okay. Especially if you do certain things, like you seize him by the genitals. And he said, if a woman does that, you cut her hand off. And I think that seems a little extreme. However, it was meant to give an example. Strong punishment. Don't get in the fight in the first place, but what you're doing is you may, and she's talking, he's not just talking about grabbing him. He's talking about doing damage. You do damage to that area, there goes his family. And especially if it was a young man who had no children. And I think this is why the kind of the eye for an eye and the tooth for a tooth law was involved there. That because it was based on that concept that you're interfering not only where you shouldn't interfere, but you are causing a bad situation. If you've, I guess eye for an eye, if you've mutilated in some way his body, then you're going to have a mutilation of your body. And the easiest way to do that was to cut off the part of your body that caused the offense in the first place. I don't know I don't see any examples in the Bible of that ever happening, but God said you put people together and things can happen. And so he said, if that happens, that's to be the case. Okay. So, two laws, uh, well, there you are. Uh, two laws commanding justice, weights and measures. Uh, was with my years ago, and I'm just giving an example. He deals with years ago. They the scales at a butcher shop or in a grocery store back in the butcher area, the scales only faced the butcher. You didn't know. Now the scales. Well, I go to Kroger or I go to a grocery store here. When she puts something on the scales, I can see how much it weighs. Well, back then you couldn't, and the counters were kind of high. I was with my grandmother one time, and she was buying some meat at the grocery store. I spent Saturday, Friday night with them at the farm, and they go to the stores on Saturday coming in from the farm. And I noticed her peeking around like this. She'd peek around, and he put something on there, and she'd peek around, and he put something else on there. And she, Grandma, what you doing? So I'm making sure he's not putting his thumb on the scales. What do you mean? Well, they could put their hand up there and rest it on the counter, but their thumb was on the scales, which could make it weigh 2 or 3 ounces, a pound more, just by the pressure he had putting on the thumb on the scales. She couldn't see that. She was going to make sure his thumb wasn't on there. Well, God says, you can't do that. If you ask for a pound, you better get a pound. And, and you better give a pound. So that was kind of what he was talking about there in the weights and the measures. Differing the weights, he said it's an abomination. A just balance. I think Solomon said it on one occasion. He said a just balance belongs to the Lord. So that's what he's talking about. And if you try to cheat, again, it's defrauding the other person. So don't cheat your fellow man. Treat him the way you would want to be treated. And I think that's what that's behind most all of his concepts and laws, is to regulate how we treat our fellow man. The principle is still there. So I think we need to live by it. We'll stop there. We will get back, and it's about almost 4:15 here. It's dinner time where Christopher and Emmanuel are. So we don't want them to have to get hungry. So what time is it there?
9:13.
9:13.
9:30?
13.
13.
Oh, shoot, if I was there, I'd already been in bed. I go to bed early. I appreciate you, brothers. And we'll have a closing prayer. We'll come back Thursday afternoon at 1:30 and pick up where we left off. And so any comments you need to make or before we have a closing prayer? No, Jeremiah, close us out with a prayer, would you please?
Yes, let's pray. Gracious God, you are fair to us. We just pray, Lord, as we read this and we study this, we're fair to other people. Sometimes we can want to seek justice. We can want to seek things our way to please us, but at the same time, you want us to treat everyone as we would want to be treated ourselves. And we just pray now, Lord, that people see that as we walk this life of Christ, and by doing so, they'll want to know more about Him. And we just pray, Lord, that you help us in our walk through all the struggles and trials that we go through. And we just pray all this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. And y'all have a good week, and I will see you on Thursday.
All right. See you, Gene. Thank you.
God bless.